What's up, everybody? Corey Hughes, Bloody History. So, more Lillian Murret today. But I want to take a second, as usual, and comment on the recent debate I watched. Yesterday, I watched the debate between, if you want to call it a debate, between Fred Litwin, who is the most disgusting Zionist lone gunman proponent of all time, and Matt Crumpton, is that his name? Who does the Solving JFK podcast where nothing gets solved. So if you guys truly want to understand the difference between what real research looks like and what bullshit looks like, you guys need to go listen to this debate. It's on Sean Atwood's channel on YouTube, and it came out yesterday. I mean, these two guys are still arguing over whether or not Oswald could have made the shot. I mean, by the time Matt brought up the doctors at Parkland Hospital, I just wanted to shoot myself. These guys are stuck in like 1972 in as far as research goes. It's rather sad, though, because Matt seems like a nice guy. I don't know him at all, but when he first jumped onto the scene with a podcast that did amazing numbers right out of the gate, a section in a book with James DiEugenio and a slot in some Paramount documentary, what does that sound like to you guys? Does that sound like something earned by merit? I don't think so. What does it sound like to you guys, huh? Please, give me a fucking break. These people are clowns. All right, so let me continue on. We're going to recap a little bit of what Lillian said yesterday, because remember, we are still trying to get to the bottom of the period of September 1953 through July of 1956, right? And so we're still trying to figure out when Robert moved Marguerite and Harvey to Fort Worth from New Orleans, because the dates are all messed up. He had to come up with an additional date that he showed up in January 54 to visit them, when at first that wasn't his story. His original story was he got out of the Marines in July of 55 and then went and he bought a car, and then he went to New Orleans from Fort Worth. He doesn't say he brought them back to Fort Worth, but Lillian Murret says that. But that's an impossibility in July of 1955, because we know that didn't happen till July of 1956. So we have lies, and we have obfuscation here, and we have confliction of dates, because she can't seem to remember when or where Marguerite lived, or whether or not she stayed with her or not. And when I go over the totality of Lillian's testimony, it becomes pretty apparent that she has been subjected to anti-interrogation training. The level of confliction of her answers is too scripted. In the very beginning, she said that Marguerite never stayed with her at all, maybe a day or two, right? But then it changed to 2 or 3 weeks, or however long, right? So, because she's recalling different instances and probably different Marguerites, right? Once again, I am starting to come around to the belief that the false Marguerite is most certainly a relative, a sister probably. And so that means it's either going to be Pearl, who allegedly died in August of 1963, but we really don't have any evidence of that, or Amenth Voitier, as written about in Robert Duran's book, which I can't find a copy of. I can't find a copy of it anywhere. It's not on Amazon. It's not on eBay. It's almost like the fucking book doesn't exist. But I need that book. That's my number one priority, to see if he has even just one nugget of information that I haven't been able to figure out. I was able to verify all the themes of his thesis, with the exception of his identifying Oswald as Leon Voitier, which doesn't make sense, and I don't believe that anyway. So I'm more of the belief that these two Oswalds were brothers. Harvey and Lee were brothers. And I believe that there's little hints towards that, and I believe the most damning statement of all is when Lee tells the psychologist in New York that his brother occasionally would go to school for him in his place. And I thought about it, and could it be Robert? And I don't know. It cannot be. It cannot be, because of the timing and how much bigger, even though Robert was small, he was called Mouse in the Catholic orphanage. But nonetheless, he was still 6 years older than Oswald. There's no chance he could have gotten away with that. And so when Harvey Oswald says his brother went in his place, to me, that's virtually a confession of the scheme. So, but I'm rambling again. We're getting off topic. 126 Exchange Place seems to be the entire crux of it all. post, September or January 53, 54. Do I believe that Harvey Oswald was at Beauregard in September of 1953? We don't have any documents that support that other than the fact that his cumulative school record showed he had a perfect or damn near perfect attendance record. But that might have been transfers. You see, the cumulative school records are just that. They're cumulative. They have everything before. So that perfect attendance record, as indicated on the September 1953 school records, could have been an indication of record transfer from New York, where he had a good attendance record. That is absolutely 100% possible. Therefore, I can't say with certainty. But if he was not attending Beauregard in September of 1953, was he attending school at all? And where was he living? I don't think he could have been at 126 Exchange Place from September to January, even though we don't have evidence of them being at Exchange Place till November of 1954. I still don't believe that because, well, not that I don't believe it. We don't have any evidence of where they were if they were not at 126 Exchange Place. But as per the New Orleans phone directory, they had other names there, right, in 1953. So it's really hard to say. But if he was not living there, then we have just another gap that we have to figure some address. Now, this is the greatest thing about Kennedy. There's so many documents and witnesses and so much has been hidden that you can be like, man, I don't even know. I don't even think there are any other fucking witnesses to them at this time period. And then all of a sudden I'm stumbling through some documents and what do you know? There's a weird document where a woman claims to, I'm giving a hypothetical, okay? A woman claims to have lived next to Oswald in some other state or something, right? Like this stuff happens, right? So it's not beyond the pale that we could find another document indicating a witness who saw them living in New Orleans between September and December of 1953. That's what I'm looking for, other than confirmation they were at 126 Exchange. Either way, we don't have Lee Oswald showing up in New Orleans till May of 1954 when he stays at 1254 and 1252 St. Mary's, which is the place run by Myrtle Evans. It was a little fourplex. It was a two-story house turned into a fourplex. So, but that's where we are. And so I'm going to pick it up here. I mentioned last time we have an additional address of 1910 Britannia, right? But when I look up Myrtle Evans actually lived on Britannia. So I don't know if they confused the address or when Lillian says they stayed at Myrtle Evans' place, was she referring to 1910 Britannia and then the St. Mary's address? Well, probably not, because Myrtle Evans' statements don't indicate that. Myrtle Evans says that she didn't see her until she showed up in May, right? So we can pretty much rule that out. But Myrtle Evans certainly did live on Britannia. That's, I can confirm. See, this is another pattern we'll see with Marguerite Oswald. She will allegedly have an address that's just a couple numbers up from somebody else that she knows on the same street. She's done this a couple times. She did it at the Sherwood Forest address with the 111 versus 119, which I actually still think is misinterpreted. I think that was just Lillian Murret filling out her own address. Unless Marguerite came back from New York to put her kids in the orphanage. So, but Myrtle Evans was living at Britannia, not at the St. Mary's address. But here, when Mr. Jenner says this sentence, he goes, I believe she also lived for a time at 1910 Britannia, didn't she? He's talking about Marguerite Oswald. Well, here's something you should think about. There's not a single fucking document in the entire world that indicates that Mrs. Marguerite Oswald, lived at Britannia, except for this testimony the question by Mr. Jenner, right? You see, these fucking idiots at the Warren Commission, they would do this. They had information that they'll ask about, but that you won't find anywhere else in any document referenced anywhere. And that tells you that they're holding back information, and that information they're holding back is important. So this 1910 Britannia address absolutely needs further research. Prytania, Diana, if you're listening. So let me move on. I think that's right. I'm not sure about those different places. I mean, she would move from one place to the other, but she was at several places up there before she went to Exchange. So she's saying she was at several places before she went to Exchange. Okay. Remember, Exchange Place not supposed to have lived there till May of 55, but we have numerous indications they were there way into 1954. So, well, we appear from our records to have them living on St. Mary's in New Orleans in May or June of 54 till February of 55. That's wrong. It's till May of 55. Well, I don't know anything about that. I know Myrtle Evans was managing that apartment she lived. Do you know how it was that she went to live at 126 Exchange Place? Yes. Was that in 54 or 55? Okay, so here he's trying to trip her up again because he knows the answer. See, this is a good lawyer knows the answer to the question before he asks you, and he obviously does. I don't know. Whatever you have down there is probably right. So she defers to him often. Could it have been that Myrtle Evans lived in the spring of 54 at 1954 St. Mary Street? I don't know. Maybe that's right. I know this was a very old house where she lived. I was told that she had a family home, Myrtle, and she renovated it into a lot of apartments. How long did she stay at your house? Well, like I said, 2 or 3 weeks at the most, somewhere in there. Are you pretty sure that they moved directly from this place into Exchange Alley? Well, either they or Myrtle's, right? So she's really just all over the place and she doesn't really know. Now, tell me about Lee Harvey Oswald during the couple weeks that he spent at your house. Did you notice any change in him from the time you'd known him previously? Why would he ask that? He would know. He would now have been about 3 years older than that, right? Yeah, well, like I said, he just come from New York, and she had told me about him not wanting to go to school, but she enrolled him over at Beauregard, which wasn't too far from my home. It's a school on Canal Street. It's just a few blocks off where you get off the bus at Lakeview. So she enrolled him there and gave him my address for the school and blah, blah, blah. I'm going to skip forward a little bit. This part we covered last time. I'm going to skip over this. I just wanted to go over that section really quickly because remember, that is persistently a problem. And we need to get to the bottom of this rather quickly. Did you get the impression that Lee Harvey Oswald was doing well in school, or what was your feeling about that at the time? I think he was doing very poor work in school most of the time. Then he got to the point where he just didn't think he ought to have to go to school at all. He seemed this was his whole attitude. And when I mentioned that to Marguerite, she seemed to think that this was the beginning of our misunderstanding. She didn't think her child could do any wrong, and I could see that he wasn't interested in going to school because I have had children of my own going to school, and they always done real well in their grades. When he came with his mother from New York, did he ever discuss anything with you relative to his trip to New York? No, he never said anything, but my sister told me about the time they had to take him out of the apartment when she was working and put him in that place, and she had to get a lawyer to get him out. Now, this boy was about 14 years of age at the time. Is that right? After they returned from New York and stayed at your place? Hang on a second. This is a problem. Because he would have been, let me see. Would he have been 14? Yes, he would have. Okay, never mind. Yes, then at the next I heard, when he came here, he didn't want to go to school because he thought he knew all they had to teach him. And she must have allowed him to go work at Touget's because he had that summer job. So is Touget's the first employment of Oswald? That's a question. Was that in 1955? Would that be about right? Yes. Did the boy come over to visit you occasionally when they were living at Exchange Alley? Yes, he did. Just before he got the job at Touget's. He liked seafood, you see, and used to come over from school on Friday afternoon. Was the fact that he had defected prominently displayed in the New Orleans papers? Well, not so much here, but in Fort Worth and so forth. Over there they mentioned it. They mentioned quite a to-do about it. So let me point something out here. Most people aren't aware of this, but at some point in time, Lillian Murret made a Social Security claim in Texas. That is a fact. I can't find what exactly it is, whether she had a Social Security card issued or what she did involving Social Security. But Lillian Murret's never, ever known to have lived anywhere except New Orleans, ever. But we have this anomaly of a Social Security claim at some point in Texas. Just throwing that out there. There was nothing in the New Orleans papers about it? I don't think so. There might have been. Well, at least it didn't come to your attention. I don't think they had anything here about that at all, but they did have a lot about it in the Fort Worth paper. Did she send any of those newspaper clippings to you? No, she came down here. To New Orleans. Yes, sir. And she told you about it. She told me all about it, what she knew about it. She didn't know too much about it, she said. why he did it or anything like that, but she said that he had a right to go any place he wanted to go, I believe. All right, so let me pause once again. What problems are we running into? If you're an astute observer, you should know what problem we're running into right now. Earlier, when Lillian is talking about Oswald, and she talks about him going to the Soviet Union, she had to be corrected by Mr. Jenner. She said that she didn't see Lee until he had come back from Russia, and he goes, "Well, you didn't know he went at all, did you?" She goes, "No, I didn't know. I didn't know he went at all." So basically, she testified that she didn't know that he had gone to Russia until he got back in '63, right? But here, like 2 pages fucking later, now she's testifying. She told me all about it, what she knew about it. She didn't know too much about it, she said, why he did it or anything like that, but she said that he had a right to go any place he wanted to go, and I believe that's what she said. So, so she's contradicting her own testimony here again. Like, this is the worst. She's the worst. These people, I'm telling you, the Claveries are all fucking sociopaths. I'm sorry. I don't give a fuck. 2 brothers turn up dead within 4 months of each other, and these women are sociopaths? I don't know, man. I think their deaths need some further investigation. Typhus my fucking ass. Did she seem to think that he was living in the pattern that she had brought him up in? What's that? Did she seem to think he was living in the pattern that she had brought him up in? That is, to be independent. Well, it's hard to judge that. When you only have one person or one child, maybe you do have a tendency to feel that way, but who knows what's in a person's mind? I think your mind is what really belongs to you, and I don't think anyone knows what's running through your mind. I really believe that, so I couldn't tell you how she felt about it or how he felt about it or what made him do the things he did. I can only tell you what I think, but that doesn't mean that much, I know, because I really don't know. You just can't tell what's running through a person's mind. You may think you know their mind, but you don't, I think. I think he went over there because he wasn't satisfied with the life he was living, and maybe he wanted to see how it was over there, I guess. I don't know. Did you have any conversations with him about it after he came back? Yes. No. Oh, I spoke about it, and he might say something once in a while about how they lived or something, but he never did discuss it. Did you have any talks with your sister or with him when he was working as a delivery boy or messenger for Tujagues? No. Oh, on a side note, Gerard Tujague, who was the boss of Tujagues, was a co-signer for the Friends of Democratic Cuba out of Bannister's office, in case you didn't know that. No, I didn't know anything other than he was working there and he was a runner and that sort of thing for them. Now, he had not yet graduated from high school, is that right? I don't believe he graduated from high school yet. No, sir. He came out of this junior high, and like I said, I didn't even know he went to Easton. I remember one morning he came over to the house and he said that he went to get on the ball team, but he didn't have any shoes and he didn't have a glove. So I said, "Well, Lee, we can fix you up." And I gave him a glove, but I don't think we had shoes to fit him. Joyce's husband sent him a pair of shoes from Beaumont. That's Emil something, I forget. A pair of, we need to seriously look into him, Joyce and Emil. Fucking for sure. All the Murret kids need to be investigated, because I'm pretty goddamn sure that the fucking Murret kid in the white shirt with the tight curly hair with the hairline that matches the Beauregard photo, I'm pretty sure that's the goddamn kid who went to Beauregard. Or at least at some point in time, perhaps was the one working at Pfister Dental Lab, right? Because I just don't see Lillian Murret babysitting a non-kid, right? So I think there's a good chance that one of Lillian Murret's kids, the one in the white shirt with that with the hairline, was the one working at Pfister under the name Lee Oswald. I'm starting to be pushed in that direction, and I think that's realistic, unless Lillian Murret was willing to pretend to be mother to somebody else, which I don't have any evidence of at this point. Joyce's husband sent him a pair of shoes from Beaumont, a pair of baseball shoes. And I told Lee, I said, "Lee, when you need anything, just ask me for it. And if there's a way to get it for you, we will get it." So then he got on the team, I think, but he got off as quick as he got on. I don't know why. He never discussed that with us as to why that was, and we never found out. He never discussed that with you. No, I don't think he got on the team, though. He never did actually play on it, I don't think. For one thing, I don't think he was the type of boy who was too good of an athlete. Do you see what she did in one sentence? In one paragraph, in one set of sentences, she went from, so then he got on the team, okay? I think, but he then got off the team just as quick. I don't know why. He never discussed that with us, and we never found out. He never discussed it with you. And then she says, no, I don't think he got on the team, though. He never did actually play it, I don't think. You see what I'm saying? So she plants seeds that she immediately discards. This is a pattern of anti-interrogation training. For one thing, I don't think he was the type of boy who was too good an athlete. Like a lot of boys, I guess they wanted him to be one of those that sit on the bench, and he didn't like to sit on the bench. So when they didn't let him play on the team and wanted him to sit on the bench, I guess he just left. I don't know that, though. You see what she just said? I don't know that, though. You think that's what happened to Lee, do you? I think that's what might have happened. I don't know, though. Was he a competitive person? Was he what? Was he competitive? No, I don't think so. Like I said, at school, his only remark about that was that he didn't think he had to go to school to learn these subjects because he knew all of them. He said he wasn't learning anything and it was just a waste of time. I told him, I said, Lee, that's not the idea. It's not a waste of time. You've got to go through school in order to graduate because you need to graduate to get anywhere in this world. I told him you're going to have to go on to college and make something out of yourself, even if you think you know all the subjects. I think that's one of the things that Marguerite got a little put out with me about. She always wanted to let Lee have his way about everything. Even after he came back from Russia, I talked to him about that, but he answered me the same way. He said that he didn't see any use in going to school, that he knew all the subjects. Did your children discuss Lee in your presence? Did they discuss Lee? Yes. What did your children think of Lee? They loved Lee, I think. He was in my home and he acted like any other boy would act, no different as far as that goes. I didn't have television then, so we would eat dinner and then go listen to the radio and go to bed and get up the next morning and go do the same things. Actually, the children didn't have much contact with him because he wouldn't go out and play at all. They really loved him a lot, though. They have always loved him. Then eventually they went to Texas, is that right? Yes. Now, was that in the fall of 1956? I think so, yes. Well, I think it's in July. I think it's July 1st. They left New Orleans and went to Texas in 1956, right? That is right. That's when he joined the Marines. I don't know what date that is, but I know he joined the Marines after they left. Your sister didn't tell you, and Lee didn't tell you that they were about to move to Texas? Well, I think that's about the time Robert came in, because the next thing she said that Robert didn't want to stay here. He did not want to make his home here, he said. He said New Orleans was not his home and that his friends were in Texas. So I don't know if Robert left first or if they left altogether. In fact, I didn't know she was leaving until she rang up one day. She had a sewing machine that belonged to us, a portable sewing machine that we had loaned her. And she called one day and she was already packed and ready to go to the train station or whatever it was, the way she was going. And all she said was, "We're leaving. Come get your machine." We never did get the machine. When we went back up there, the place was locked up and we never did get back. So what does this tell you? It tells you she was living at Exchange Place when she left New Orleans to go back to Fort Worth. That's really important because that gives us like a minimum of a 2.5-year stint at 126 Exchange Place, if you believe Robert Oswald, who said that they moved in there in January, right? This is why this is also important to work out. And, the only way to work it out is to find these contradictions in the testimony and then lay it out like a logic problem, because that's ultimately what this is. This is the most complicated logic problem of all time. And actually, logic problems are an excellent way to practice sharpening the mind for doing this kind of work, if anybody's interested in sharpening their minds. You never know. Sometimes I feel like I'm talking to myself here. But, yeah, so this is important. The fact that she left directly from Exchange Place goes to show that she wasn't at the St. Mary address. She wasn't anywhere else. She wasn't at Lillian's. Unfortunately, because of their lies, we don't really have an exact time. We think it's July of 1956 because that's when Oswald put on his thing. And then I said it was July 31st because Armstrong had found that out. But then what did I do? I found in the credit report, right, that it had indicated earlier than the 31st. So John Armstrong got that totally wrong, right? So goddamn, research can be like, a back and forth like tennis or something like that. Ping pong, that's a better one. This was a portable electric sewing machine. Yes, she told us she was leaving right then and to come and get it. She said she would leave it at the house or something like that. And that's like how it was. Like I said, when we got over there, the place was locked up and we didn't even get the machine back. She had some furniture that belonged to her there. I think so. I don't know whether she took anything with her besides her clothing or not, but she left. And where was this she called you from? Do you know? Well, they were over on Exchange Place at the time. Exchange. Yes. Did you go over right there to get the machine? No, I didn't. when we did go to the place, it was all locked up. So then that was the circumstance as you knew it, after Robert got out of the service. Yes, and came to New Orleans. She thought he might live here and work and help support the family. But he didn't like New Orleans. That's right. He said all of his friends were in Texas and he wanted to move over there. He said he wanted to live in Texas where his friends were. Yes, that's what he said. He said Texas was his home, not New Orleans. Okay, so here's a problem with all this. Oh my God. The problem with all this is not supposed to have happened. This is July 1955, but they didn't move out of there for another year afterwards. Right? This is the fucking problem. This is the problem. And then when she says, yes, and shortly after that, I forgot when, but Robert married. Well, Robert married in November of 1956. This is when they were living at the Collinwood address in Fort Worth, right? So we have to assume that Robert attempted. See, here's a problem, though. That gives us, if that's the case, and what Lillian says is correct, then that gives us a fucking year gap that we don't know where Robert Oswald is, because he's allegedly out of the Marines in July of 55. And he says he got out of the Marines and within a couple of days bought a car and drove to New Orleans and did this, and then they all came back to Texas. But that didn't happen till fucking 56, July of 56. So what the fuck happened to Robert Oswald between July of 55 and July of 56? This is problematic. It's just now striking me how fucking problematic this is. And the ease at which Lillian is testifying tells me that she's probably correct in how this went out. So now we're just missing a year of fucking Robert Oswald's life. 55 to 56. God damn, I wish I could prove Robert had a motorcycle. And why do I wish Robert had a motorcycle? Because then I could say that Robert was the guy working at fucking... God damn it, it seems so obvious at this point. Holy shit. It seems so obvious that it was Robert Oswald working at Pfister's. It just fucking clicked for me. That's probably where Robert's missing year was, in New Orleans. So now I have to double check what the official story says about Robert Oswald between July of 55 and July of 56. Because he went by fucking Lee Oswald. We know this for a goddamn fact. He wrote it in books that people saw on his bookshelf that he said, oh, it must have been my brother. And then we got somebody named Lee Oswald, who's definitely in on the scoop espousing communism, who looks kind of like Lee Oswald. I bet in 56 he looked a whole lot more like his brother than he did later on in life. God, this is all making so much sense. This is all making so much sense. Now I just need to sort out the dates of that year of Robert Oswald and double check the Tujeg and the fucking Pfister and check all that stuff. Pfister's in 58, yes, but no, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all, and I'll tell you why. Because if he was doing this in his brother's name in 55 and 56, then it is only common sense he was doing it in 58. Which brings into question he works for the Acme Brick Company. Are you fucking kidding? Isn't Acme like the fucking Wile E. Coyote and shit? Give me a break. There's something shady in there. And then we have some employment at Convair, which went on to become Lockheed, right? So that's all thrown in the mix for Robert as well. And if this isn't the operation that I think it is, then it was Robert the whole time, acting as his brother, going by the name Lee Oswald. This is the path that we need to pursue, Diana, for future reference. What kind of boy was Robert? I don't know too much about Robert. After they moved away, I didn't talk too much about Robert, and I didn't know John too well either. There's one thing, Robert and John, they never recognized one another as brothers. That is blatantly false. John Pick testified to the exact opposite of that. They always embraced each other as brothers. Always. And that's why when at one point Harvey Oswald introduced John Pick to his wife as his half-brother. And John Pick was taken aback because he had never done that ever. Ever. To John Pick, they were all just brothers. So this statement here is a blatant lie. Robert and John, they never recognized one another as brothers. Tell me about that. They were stepbrothers. They weren't stepbrothers. They were half-brothers. Or were they really stepbrothers? Having lived together from real small children, you would think that they would love one another as brothers. You know, they would think being small children, they would accept each other as brothers and wouldn't think anything about being half-brothers or stepbrothers. Except that they had two different names, Pick and Oswald, right? Yes, that's right. Tell me this, Mrs. Murret. Do you think that fact your sister Marguerite insisted on John Edward Pick retaining his Pick name despite the fact that her husband Oswald wanted to adopt him contributed to that feeling between the boys? Well, I don't think, because John was 2 years old when she married Oswald, and then Robert was born a few years after that. So I don't think that would bring that about, but that's what she told me, that Oswald wanted to adopt John. And she said, no, John has a father, and his name is Pick, and let's leave it at Pick, and let the father contribute to him. Well, perhaps I didn't frame my question right. You were under the impression that the boys were conscious of the difference in the name Pick against the name as against Oswald, weren't you? Yes. And you do recall that each regarded the other as his brother, isn't that right? Well, I think Lee loved Robert a lot, but maybe he wasn't too fond of John. In a different way, maybe he didn't love John as much as he did Robert. That's just what I think. How did John and Robert get along? I don't know. I was never in their presence too much at that age. I kept them when Mrs. Oswald gave birth to Lee, but they were little then, and they seemed... Well, hang on a second. I don't know. I was never in their presence too much at that age. I kept them when Mrs. Oswald gave birth to Lee, but they were little then, and they seemed to be getting along all right. I had them for about a week, and I remember sitting outside, and they were saying that it had better not be a girl because we don't want any girls in this family. Oh, well, that was boy talk, was it not? Oh, yes, but they did say it better not be a girl. When did you first become aware that Lee had entered the Marines? Not until he came in that Saturday, when he wanted to be stationed at Keesler Field. That's right. That's what he said when he came in through on a Saturday. But then I never heard from Lee at all anymore. Now you've already touched on some information regarding when he went to Russia. Marguerite communicated with you about the fact that he was in Russia. Is that right? Well, like I said, my son-in-law contacted her because we hadn't heard from her in a very long time. So he looked in the telephone book over there and found her number. What's your son-in-law's name? Emil O'Brien. He called her, and he told us that she said that she had this accident, like I told you before. So I called her, I think, or her brother. I can't remember which. Hang on a second. What? He called her, and he told us that she said that she had this accident, like I told you before. So I called her, I think, or her brother. I can't remember which. Whose brother? Whose fucking brother? Hold on a second. Whose fucking brother are you talking about? Let me reread this whole fucking thing just to make sure I'm not tripping over some bullshit, okay? What is your son-in-law's name? Emil O'Brien. He called her, which means Emil called Marguerite. That's correct. And he told us that she had this accident. So Emil calls his mother and says that Marguerite had an accident. Like I told you before, so I called her. So she calls Marguerite. So I called her, I think, or her brother. I can't remember which. Whose fucking brother? Whose brother are you talking about? You mean your brother, since she's your sister? Is that what the fuck you're talking about? And what brother are you fucking talking about? The brothers are dead. The brothers are fucking dead. So who the fuck are you talking about, Lillian Murret? Oh my God, this is important. I'm going to read this for the fucking fifth time, okay? He called her, and then he told us that she said she had this accident, like I told you before, so I called her, I think, or her brother. I can't remember which. Whose fucking brother are you talking about? I'm sorry, this is like 911 exclamation point type shit here. This needs to be significantly clarified. It was pretty near time for him to get out, but when he came in, he only stayed for 2 days at her house, or 1 day, or whatever it was, and he said, well, this is it, it's not for me, and he left, and that's when she called me, and she said she thought he was coming to New Orleans, and that he would be coming by bus, she thought, and that maybe he would be coming to my house, but for me not to tell him that she had called me, but I never saw Lee or anything. Did he contact you at all? No, I never saw Lee or heard from him until the next thing I knew when she told me she received this letter, I think from Russia. She called you and told you about that. Yes. Now, during all this time that he was in the Marines, he didn't write you, did he? I never heard from him, no, sir. The only time he saw you was on that one Saturday. Yes. And when he was there on that Saturday, he told you he was going to be stationed at Keesler Field. That's right. Did he say anything about what his experience has been in the Marines? He didn't say anything. It was a rush affair. He came up and rang the bell, and he was in uniform, and he said, "What do you think? The people on the bus thought I was a cadet, and here I am, a big Marine." We took him out to lunch, and we left him off at the custom house, like I said, and that was the end of it. What's up with the custom house? I don't get what's up with the custom house. But maybe you might like to know this. Before Lee went into the Marines while he was in New Orleans, they were going to live on Exchange Alley. I think he tried to join the service then, a branch of the service. I don't know which branch or anything. But anyway, he must have gone to the induction station, and they told him that he could sign up if his mother would sign. Now, he met her in town, I think, and he was all excited, and he wanted to join the Marines or whatever. And if he was, it was he going to join. I can't remember if it was the Marines, and he said, "If you will sign for me, I can go." And she said, "No, I'm not going to sign for you." So he was very indignant about the whole thing. And he told her that she was stopping him from going in. So then he went around for a while, and he came back and told her that if she would sign the affidavit, go to the lawyer's office and sign an affidavit, that he would be able to get in. So she went around to the lawyer's office, Tshirt, with him, and I think it was Mr. C. No, it was Tshirt, wasn't it? Instead of Mr. Sear. And he had expired since then, and Mr. Sear told her, "Well, since you can't do anything with him, and if it was what he wants to do, we'll go ahead and let him go." So the affidavit was signed for him to go in the service. So then the next step was that when he got over to the place, I don't know whether it was the auditorium or not, where they sent him over with his suitcase, but the person who was in charge there wouldn't let him sign up, wouldn't let him go, and that was that. You mean they wouldn't take the affidavit? They wouldn't admit him on the affidavit. That's right. So that upset him for a while, but he said very little about it. And then he met someone in this branch of the service who had taken a liking to him. And he used to go over there and converse with him about different things in the service and so forth. And I don't know who he was or what they talked about or anything like that, though. That's not in any of the Warren Commission stuff at all. Was Lee an industrious boy as a high school boy? He didn't seem to have worked much after school. Well, of course, he was a young kid. I don't know what he did at home. I know I never did have anything for him to do at my house. Did your boys work after school? When did they go to school? My boys? Yes, my boys. Let's see. They always went to school, and during vacation time, well, they had paper routes and things like that. That's what I mean. One of my boys had a paper route, and he bought about $900 worth of bonds because I figured that I didn't need his money to feed him. And by buying a bond or two every week, he would have enough to go to school later on, and it really came in handy. And then he used to pass out public service bills. One of my boys had 3 jobs at one time. He used to go to Loyola, where he was studying sociology, and he was given a fellowship to work in Father Victor's office. He was a priest, and he helped the father write a book. So he was given a fellowship that last year, but he always worked his way. That's John. And Marilyn had went to school, and she had worked her way through school too. And Joyce, she went to LSU, and Joyce, we helped pay her way through, and but she had to leave school for 1 year and go work in order to get back again to school. But now Lee just didn't think he had to go to school. He said that he was smart enough and he couldn't learn anything at school, that nobody could teach him anything. I think his mother thought that he was very smart too, evidently, because she always upheld his brightness, and she was bright, Did he do a lot of reading when he stayed at your house? Well, he didn't do much reading at my house. What? Hang on a second. Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ, Lillian. Keep your fucking story straight. Well, he didn't do much reading at my house, but she said he stayed in the room up where they lived and read all the time. That's not what she said before. And that he had this little radio, and that he had taken it apart and fixed it and so forth and things like that. And he said he didn't have any friends because it was no use, because they didn't like to do things he liked to do. Who didn't like to do the things he liked to do? Well, Lee's friends wouldn't like to do the things Lee liked to do. Lee said that. Most of the boys had money, and went out on the weekends with girls and so forth, but Lee couldn't afford to do those things, so he didn't mix. But he did like to visit the museums and walk around the front and go to the park and do things like that. And you very seldom can get a teenager to do that kind of thing these days, not even then. They don't like all that type of life, but that's what he liked. Was he inclined to want to be by himself? What's that? Was he inclined to want to be by himself? Well, he said that's what the reason was, because I asked him, why don't you go with the boys from school and so forth? And he said, well, they don't like to do the same things I like. But I do remember when he was at my house, he used to call some little girl at the time and talk to her quite a long time on the telephone. And I think he made friends with some boy at Beauregard School when he was in the Sea Scouts for a while. What the fuck are the Sea Scouts? And why have I never heard of the Oswald Sea Scouts before? He had a uniform and everything. He didn't stay up there too long, I don't think. He wasn't in the Sea Scouts too long. No, he wasn't. Is there a Liberty Hotel in New Orleans? There could be. Or the Hotel Liberty? There might be. I don't know. What kind of apartment was that your sister Marguerite had on Exchange Alley? Why did she just change the Why did he change the subject like that? Did you catch that? He just totally changed the fucking subject. So, well, that was a pretty nice apartment that he had there on Exchange Alley. Yes, that was a nice apartment that she had. A lot of people would be surprised because with all those pool rooms and everything down below, it looks like a pretty rough section, and she had a real nice apartment. I know we read in the papers about, condemning that section where the boy lived and so forth, but, all that sort of stuff, but they would be surprised at how nice an apartment was up there that they had. A lot of people like to live in the French Quarter just because it's the Vieux Carré, and because of that reason, rents are pretty high. Anyway, her rent was considered reasonable. She had her own bedroom, and she had a large living room and a breakfast room and a bath. It was a very nice place, and she fixed it up real nice. Lee had the bedroom, and my sister... Okay, do you see how she just did that again? She had her own bedroom, and she had a large living room. And then she says Lee had the bedroom. So see, she's just fucking... This anti-interrogation training is baked into the fucking cake. Lee had the bedroom, and my sister used to sleep on the studio couch when she found the apartment really convenient, being right off Canal Street and everything. If she wanted to go to the movies, it was just down the block, and if she wanted to go to any other stores, she was right in that area where she could go. So actually it was economical to live that close to Canal Street, so she actually saved money that way, she told me. Of course, they had these pool rooms and so forth in that section, but I don't think that Lee ever went into those places because he never was a boy that got into any trouble. For one thing, he never did go out. We all knew that he should have been going out, but he stayed in and read or something. An average teenager was going to school at Beauregard and would probably been there shooting pool and things like that, but he didn't do that. His morals were very good. His character seemed to be good, and it was very polite and refined. There was one thing he did. He walked very straight. He always did, and some people thought that it was part of his attitude and that he was arrogant or something like that, but of course you can't please everybody. But that he did have a good opinion of himself, did he not? Oh, yes, he did. Did you hear from him when he was in Russia? One time I heard it was a postcard. I think it was the last Christmas he spent in Russia, and he wrote the postcard, and all he had on it was Merry Christmas, and he said on it, "Write to my mother," and he gave me the box on the card. Now I wanted to keep this card, but I had the children at the house, and I laid the card on the side, and I didn't copy the address when I wrote out a postcard to send it to him. And in the meantime, Gene, that's your son, Gene? Yes, he was at the seminary, and they were saving foreign stamps in connection with something over at the seminary, so he took that card with him, and after I had written the card to Lee, the children tore it up, so I didn't have the address anymore. When I wrote to Lee, I didn't want to write anything in the letter, so I just wrote it on an open card, but the children tore it up, and I lost the address, and I couldn't write him at that point. You did write the card, but your children tore it up. Well, my grandchildren, it was just a postcard, so there wasn't any communication between you or any member of your family and while Lee was in Russia. Is that correct? That's right. We just got that one card from Lee, and I never answered it because the card was destroyed before I could mail it. When did the next you hear from Lee? I mean, now before you saw him, when the next time did you hear about him? Well, I just heard that he was over in Russia, that he had defected to that country, but they came to New Orleans after that, and then they went back to Texas. You mean Marguerite? Yes, they were over there after that. She did live in New Orleans for a while then. No, she just came for a visit. Yes, she did stay with you. Oh, yes, she stayed with me. And you had discussions during that time about his going to Russia. Well, not too much. Well, what statements were made, if any? What statements were made, if any? I mean, was that your impression? Well, she seemed kind of upset about it. I mean, she tried to get him back to the States, but she said that he didn't talk it over with her on the he didn't talk to her over the telephone. You mean she tried to reach him by telephone? Yes, sir. The paper office over there in Fort Worth was the one who contacted Lee at the hotel over there, but he didn't talk. He hung up. I believe Robbie tried to get him back and so forth, but that's all I know about it. So when we didn't hear any more from her after that, she left here. She said she was going to get lost. She said that to you. Yes, she said nobody was going to know where she was going. Why? I don't know why. So then I didn't hear from her anymore until one day the telephone rang and I answered the phone and Lee said, "Hello, Aunt Lillian." And I didn't recognize his voice and not thinking about Lee. I have other nephews. And I said, "Who is this?" And he said, "This is Lee." And I said, "Lee?" And he said, "Yes." I said, "When did you get out? When did you get back? What are you doing?" He said, "I've been back since about 1.5 years now." And I said, "Well, I'm glad you got back." And he said, "I'm married and I got a baby." And I think she said she was 14 months. So anyway, "Would you put me up for a while?" And he said, "I'm down here trying to find a job. Would you put me up for a while?" And I said, "Yeah, we'd be glad to, Lee." But then I started thinking, because if he had a wife and a child, I would have to make other arrangements maybe. And so then I asked him, I said, "Lee, are you alone?" He said, "Yes." "Well, come on over then." This was in May or April of 63, is that right? Yes. Just about a year ago? Yes. Do you remember whether it was May or April, which month it was? It was way after Easter, I know that. It was possibly the week after Easter. All right. Now he arrived at your home, is that right? Yes. He took the streetcar and bus, and I suppose to be coming to my house, and he came to the house, and he was very poorly dressed. How was he dressed? He just had on a sports shirt and a very poorly pair of pants. Did he have on a suit coat? A suit coat, yes. No, he didn't. What was your husband? Was your husband home? No. Was anybody home other than you? No. What luggage did he have when he arrived at your home? I don't think he came over with anything to the house. He could have had one of these bags, when he came over to my home from the bus station. Now, this is particularly important to us. Let me take you back just a year or so and tell me, first of all, as to your recollection of whether he had any luggage with him when he arrived at your house. All right, well, I'm going to call it here for today, guys, and we'll pick this up tomorrow. Thanks for tuning in.